Now, the confirmation fight for a vice chair of the Federal Reserve, it's usually kind of a tedious affair, but not this one. Now, to understand why, all you need to do is listen to the past statements of Biden's nominee, Sarah Bloom Raskin. At today's hearing, she tried to come off as kind of a non-ideological technocrat, but she's really a climate fanatic who wants to obliterate the entire fossil fuel industry. And last spring, she made clear it's the job of unelected bureaucrats to do just that.
In order to maximize the speed and safety of a move into a sustainable, durable, net zero economy and away from climate change disaster, we need to use the financial regulatory apparatus to engage financial markets and financial institutions in affecting both direction and pace.
She's already proposed a number of what she calls tools to drive up energy prices and starve the oil and gas industry and make your life miserable. Now, these include climate disclosures for banks and higher capital requirements to green their portfolios. Now, not that I'd recommend taking investment advice from her.
Of all the 158 subsectors in the economy, oil and gas drilling are declining the fastest. And there's no indication that the value of fossil fuel assets is ever going to return. It's one of the worst investments there is.
Of course, since she made those remarks, the price of a barrel of oil has climbed nearly 122%. Do you really want her managing the Federal Reserve's holdings? Now, she cares more about remaking the country via the Great Reset than about keeping inflation down and unemployment low. Back in September, she wrote, financial regulators must reimagine their own role so they can play their role, their part in the broader reimagining of the economy. Now, she doesn't mean reimagining it for herself. She's gamed the system just fine. Just before today's hearing, we learned that Raskin's husband, impeachment hero, Congressman Jamie Raskin, failed to report the fact that she got a huge payout from a company that she was on the board of and that her past Federal Reserve connections might have helped. Senator Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming drilled down on that revolving door deal.
Reserve trust is denied. You go on their board, then they get a master account. Who did you communicate with?
First of all, I want to be very clear here. The Federal Reserve has approved plenty of master accounts for
but not in fintech.
If you value cheap gas, being able to turn on the lights, and a Federal Reserve supervisor without ethical conflicts, tell your senator, especially if you have one of those supposedly moderate Democrats, to vote no on Raskin. Joining me now is Chuck DeVore, Vice President of the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Chuck, we wouldn't usually get into this kind of a arcana with confirmation of vice chair of anything, but this one strikes me as very important to defeat. Explain.
It's hugely important to defeat because the vice chair for supervision of banks has an enormous amount of power. You have to understand that the Federal Reserve has trillions and trillions of dollars under its control, and it can tell banks what to do. And what this nominee has proposed to do, Laura, is to end the oil and gas industry at a time when Americans are suffering from the highest inflation we've seen in 40 years. And if she follows through with her threats, she's going to starve the oil and gas industry, the domestic American energy industry, of the cash it needs to supply plentiful and affordable oil and gas energy to Americans. It's going to put Americans out of work. It's going to increase our expenses. It's going to make it more expensive to fill up your car and to keep your house warm. There's another huge issue, though, too, Laura, and that was brought out by Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, who pointed out that she is proposing to use the awesome power of regulatory rules of unelected bureaucrats to do things that the Congress hasn't even wanted to do itself. So taking under herself the sort of power that the members of the House and the Senate don't even want to take on themselves. And lastly, big issue here as well. She promised the senators that her past statements, that she wouldn't really follow through on those. But I don't think we can trust her at all. You pointed
No
out
way.
the sweet deal, $1.5 million that she got for 3 years of work with this financial technology company.
You can't trust her, Chuck. And John Tester's constituents in Montana, Mark Kelly's in Arizona, if you're watching this, you've got to urge your so-called Democrat senators, Manchin and all the rest of them, to vote no on Raskin. This is a nightmare nomination, and it should be pulled. Chuck, thank you.